The surgeon opened my chest at dawn and stitched 3 veins back into my heart. I did not know that when I woke. I only knew the ceiling. White tiles. A water stain shaped like a small bird. A machine beeping somewhere to my right, steady and patient as if it had all the time in the world. There was a tube in my throat, and I could not swallow around it. My arms would not lift. My whole body felt like it had been taken apart and put back together by someone in a terrible hurry. A nurse leaned over me. Her face swam into focus. She said my name back to me soft, like I might have lost it somewhere. Carrie. Carrie Lambert. She told me the surgery was over. She told me I had come through it. She told me I was lucky. Lucky. I came to hate that word before the week was out. They had cut me open along the breastbone. A triple bypass, the doctor said later, standing at the foot of my bed with a chart he barely glanced at. 3 arteries near my heart had closed up like old pipes. If I had waited one more day, he said I would not have woken at all. He said it the way a man reads off a weather report. Then he moved on to the next room and the next, and I lay there alone in the humming dark. Alone. That is the part I keep coming back to. I was 68 years old. I had 2 grown children. I had grandchildren who lived less than an hour away. And in the cardiac unit of a hospital outside Knoxville, in the days when a machine breathed for me and my heart was learning how to beat again, not one of them came. Not one of them called. The first day I told myself they did not know. Someone had failed to reach them. That was all. Grant, it was always hard to pin down his phone off in some meeting deals stacked on deals. Paige had the 2 children and 100 small fires to put out before breakfast. I built excuses for them the way I had built excuses for 30 years. It becomes a habit making room for people. You do it so long you forget that you are always the one sliding over. By the second day, the excuses started to wear thin. I asked the young nurse, the kind one with the freckles across her nose, whether there had been any calls to my room, any messages left at the desk. She went to check. She came back and shook her head, gentle, careful, the way you handle a thing that might break in your hands. By the 3rd day, I asked again. This time, she paused. Something crossed her face, and she tried to hide it. She told me she was sure my family was only busy. Then, when I would not let it go, she looked at the door, lowered her voice, and admitted she had overheard 2 of the other nurses talking. My family, she said, was away, traveling. Traveling, where I asked. My voice did not sound like my own. It was thin and scraped raw from the tube they had pulled out that morning. She did not want to say it. But I had spent my whole life getting the full answer out of people who would rather hand me half of one. I waited. I let the silence do the work the way I always had. And finally she told me. Italy. A cruise. The whole family had flown to Europe together. I lay very still. The machine kept its patient rhythm beside me. Somewhere down the hall a cart rolled by, and I understood in that flat and quiet way you understand the worst things exactly what had happened. While a stranger in a mask was holding my stopped heart in his hands, my son was raising a glass on a deck somewhere off the coast of Italy. While a nurse was wiping the sweat off my face, my daughter was posing for a photograph in the sun. I did not cry. I want you to know that. The tears did not come for a long time. What came instead was the past rising up whether I wanted it or not. I thought of Wallace, my husband, gone 27 years now. His heart, too, in the end. He dropped in the driveway on an ordinary Tuesday and never got up, and I stood at his grave with a boy of 16 on one side of me and a girl of 12 on the other, and I made them a promise that they would not go without. I kept it. God help me, I kept it. I was a court reporter. 31 years I sat in the well of the courtroom, my fingers moving on that little machine, taking down every word that was ever said, every oath, every lie, every verdict. I made the record. Judges, retired lawyers, forgot witnesses, swore they never said a thing, and there it was in my transcript, black on white, exactly as it happened. That was my work, to be the one person in the room who could prove what was true. And when the courtroom went dark and I drove home, I did not stop. I took depositions home to transcribe at the oak table long after the children were asleep. I typed until my eyes burned so that Grant could have his college and Paige could have hers. I packed their lunches with little notes folded inside. I sold my mother's ring the year the roof went bad and never told a soul. I gave and told myself that love was a thing you poured out, and one day it would come back to you the same way. It did not come back. It flew to Europe on my dime. Because it was my dime. I did not understand how much yet not lying in that bed. That part came in pieces. On the fourth day, a woman from the billing office came in with a clipboard and a soft, apologetic smile. She needed to sort out my payment, she said. There was a card on file and a couple of charges had bounced back, and could I confirm my bank so they could run it again? I told her I would look. My phone was in the drawer beside the bed where the nurses had tucked it. I had not touched it in days. It lit up in my hand with a long gray column of messages I did not read, and I opened my bank instead, meaning only to check that the account was there and the money was in it. The number at the top of the screen was wrong. I blinked at it. I thought my eyes, still swimming from the drugs, had put a digit in the wrong place. I looked again. The balance in the account I had built dollar by careful dollar across a lifetime was a fraction of what it should have been. And below it, transfer after transfer, a neat gray ladder of them, each one climbing out of my account and away. Not small, not the kind of thing you shrug off. Thousands, then thousands more. I scrolled. My thumb was shaking and I made it stop. Every transfer had a date, and the dates I saw marched right alongside the days I had been lying here. The day of my surgery. The day after. The day the doctor told me I might not wake. And every one of them had been made by Grant. Not stolen in the crude way you picture theft, a hand in a purse, a card lifted off a counter. This was clean. This was on paper. Years back, after a dizzy spell dropped me in an emergency room overnight, my own lawyer had sat me down and told me that every sensible woman my age should name someone to handle her money and her papers if she ever could not do it herself. So I named Grant. He worked in finance. He was good with numbers, careful, or so I had let myself believe. I signed a durable power of attorney, and I put it out of my mind. A safety net. A thing you hope you will never need. He had turned my safety net into a fishing line, and he had reeled me dry while I slept. The billing woman was still standing there, still smiling, waiting for me to read her a number. I told her I would have to call her back. My voice was very calm. I have a calm that comes over me at the worst moments, a stillness I learned in that courtroom where you keep your fingers moving no matter what is being screamed across the room. She left, and I lay in the dark, and I did not scroll anymore. I just held the phone against my chest over the long line of staples that held me together, and I breathed. They discharged me 2 days after that. Not because I begged, though I did want out. Because the surgeon finally said my heart would mend better at home than under those lights, so long as a nurse came by each day to check the incision, and I did not lift so much as a bag of groceries for weeks. No driving, no stairs if I could help it. Rest, he said. Let your body knit itself back together. He had no idea what was waiting for me at home, and I did not tell him. A medical transport brought me to my own front door on a gray afternoon. And the house I had kept for 30 years did not look like mine anymore. The grass had grown wild and gone to seed. A week of newspapers lay yellowing on the porch where no one had bothered to gather them. The mailbox hung open too stuffed to close, letters spilling out of its mouth like it was choking on them. I stood at the bottom of my own steps, one hand on the rail because the driver would not let me climb without it, and I felt the cold come up through me that had nothing to do with the weather. Inside the air was stale, and still the air of a place no one had walked through in a long while. Dust lay soft on the mantel. A single plate sat in the sink with food dried hard onto it, tossed there by someone in a hurry to be somewhere better. My own children had keys. They had come and gone, and they had left the house to rot around the memory of me. On the counter in a long white envelope torn open and left face up was a credit card statement. I did not go to it right away. I set my small hospital bag on a chair. I ran my hand along the back of Wallace's old reading chair. Then I made myself cross the room and pick it up, and I read it standing there in my coat. Restaurants I had never eaten in. Boutiques I could not have found on a map. A hotel with a name I could not pronounce. Charge after charge, and beside each one a date, and the dates were the same dates. The days of my surgery. The days I lay wired to a machine. They had been drinking wine under the sun of another country on the exact afternoons I was fighting to open my eyes. I put the paper down very gently, as if it were the thing that might break now and not me. That was when the knock came. It was Ruth Ann Deller, my neighbor from across the street, holding a warm dish wrapped in a towel. She had seen the transport pull away, she said. She had been worried sick since the ambulance came weeks ago. She had not known where they had taken me. No one had told her a thing. Her eyes went wet just looking at me standing there so thin. She pressed the dish into my hands, and it was heavy, and it smelled like someone had thought about me for an hour, and I nearly came apart right there in the doorway, over a casserole from a woman who owed me nothing. She stayed a few minutes. I made us both tea because my hands needed something to do. And Ruth Ann, who is kind and who never means a bit of harm, kept talking the way lonely neighbors do, and she told me things she did not know she was telling me. "Your children looked like they were having a wonderful time," she said. "I saw them loading up the cars, suitcases stacked to the roof. Off somewhere sunny, they said, all of them together. I remember thinking how nice the whole family going off like that." I nodded. I said yes. Europe, as if I had known, as if I had waved them off at the airport myself. And then she frowned a little and said the other thing, the odd thing. There had been a man, she said, a man in a good suit twice while I was gone. He had stood out on the lawn with a phone and taken photographs of the house, the front, the sides, the roof. She had wondered if I was thinking of selling. She had almost come over to ask, but she did not want to pry. I held my teacup, and I kept my face the way I keep my face still as still water, and I told her no, I had no plans to sell it, was probably nothing. She finished her tea. She squeezed my hand at the door and told me to knock any hour of the day or night. Then she went home and the house was quiet again, and the quiet had a different shape now. A man in a suit, photographing my house, while I was cut open in a hospital bed. I sat down in Wallace's chair in the dark, and I did not turn on the lamp. I let the room go blue and then black around me. And I waited for the rage to come, the hot kind, the kind that makes you throw things. It did not come. What came instead was worse and better both at once. It was clear. It was cold. It was the clearest I had felt in years. For a long time I had told myself a story about my family, that they were busy, not cruel, that they had forgotten me, not discarded me, that the sharp words and the missed birthdays and the way they looked through me at their own tables were just the shape of the modern world, and that I was old-fashioned to want more. I had made the excuses because the truth was too heavy to pick up. But you cannot excuse this. You cannot call this a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding does not sign transfers on the morning of your mother's surgery. A misunderstanding does not send a man in a suit to photograph her house while she bleeds. This was not forgetting. This was a decision. Somebody had sat down and made a plan, and the plan was me. I thought about my work then. 31 years of it. All those rooms full of people shouting their own versions, and my quiet machine turning it all into something that could not be argued with later. A record. I had made the record for strangers my whole life. I had made it for men who lied and women who wept, and children who did not understand why they were there. I had never once made it for myself. I looked at the statement lying pale on the counter across the dark room. I looked at the phone in my lap with its long ladder of transfers. I thought of the man in the suit and his photographs, and I understood that whatever this was, it was not finished. It was still moving. It was moving right now while I sat here in a dead man's chair with staples in my chest. So I would do the one thing I knew how to do better than anyone. I would build the record. Not tonight. Tonight my heart was tired and my body was held together with wire and thread, and even I knew when to rest. But in the morning I would begin. I would gather every date and every dollar. I would find out who the man in the suit was and what he had come to take. I would learn exactly what my son had done with the power I had handed him, and I would learn what could be done about it. Quietly, carefully, the way I had done everything my whole life. They thought they had left an old woman behind in a hospital bed. They had left a witness. I began the next morning the way I had begun every working day of my life, with paper. The nurse came at 8 to look at my incision. She told me it was healing clean. She told me to rest, to walk a little, to lift nothing. I promised her all of it, and I meant most of it, and the moment her car pulled away, I set myself up at the oak table with a legal pad, a pen, and everything I could reach. I could not drive. I could barely climb the stairs. But a court reporter does not work with her legs. She works with her eyes and her patience and her refusal to let a single word slip past unrecorded. I had 31 years of that in me. It did not leave when my heart faltered. If anything, it woke all the way up. I started with the bank. I could not go in, so I called, and when the young man on the phone tried to hand me half an answer, I did what I always did and waded him into the full one. I asked for certified copies of every statement going back 6 months. Not printouts. Certified. The kind a court will look at. Ruth Ann drove me down 2 days later to sign for them, and she sat in the car with the engine running and asked no questions because she is the sort of friend who knows when questions are a kindness and when silence is. Then I sat with the pages, and I built the thing I knew how to build. A timeline. I ruled the legal pad into columns the way I had ruled my life into columns. On the left, the date. In the middle, the charge. The transfer the dollar amount copied out in my own hand, so my eye would not skate over it. And on the right, the one column that turned a stack of numbers into a story a stranger could not argue with. On the right, I wrote where I had been. I had the hospital records for that. I had asked for those, too, my whole chart, and they gave it to me because it was mine. So I laid the two together, the money and the medicine day beside day, and I watched the story rise off the page. June the 9th. A charge for $400 at a boutique in Florence. That was the morning they threaded a camera into my heart to find the blockages. I remember the cold of the table. I remember counting backward from 10 and only reaching 7. June the 12th. $900 a restaurant on a cliff in Positano. A bottle of something I will never taste. That was the afternoon the surgeon sat my chart down and said gently that my family should be reachable because there were decisions that families sometimes had to make. There was no family to reach. They were on that cliff, raising that bottle. June the 14th. A transfer out of my account. $11,000 moved by my son under the power I had signed. That was the day of the surgery itself. The day a stranger opened my chest. My boy moved $11,000 of my money on the morning a machine was breathing for me, and then I have to assume he ordered lunch. I did not cry over it. I had gone somewhere past crying. I copied each line out in my steady hand, and beside each one I wrote the truth of where I was, and when I finished, I had 11 pages, and the 11 pages did not shake even though my hands did. "This is my record," I said to the empty room. And I meant it the way I had meant it about 1,000 transcripts. It happened. Here is the proof. No one gets to say later that it did not. But the record was not finished because the story was not finished. There was still the man in the suit. I went through the mail. Every envelope slid open and read, sorted into piles the way I sorted exhibits. Bills, warnings. A notice that my electricity was 5 days from being shut off, though there had been money enough in my account to keep the lights on in a stadium before my son drained it. And then near the bottom, a thick envelope from a real estate office in town, addressed to me as the owner of a property I had not put up for sale. Inside was a listing agreement for the cabin. I had to sit down and I was already sitting. The cabin on the lake. Wallace built it. Not paid a company to build it, built it with his own 2 hands and a borrowed truck and a summer of weekends the year Grant turned 10. I could still see him up on that roof with a nail between his lips, waving down at me. We buried a jar of the children's drawings under the front step. It was the one place on this earth where Wallace was still a little bit alive, and my son had signed a paper to sell it out from under me while I lay cut open, and he had done it again with the power I had handed him. I called the real estate office. A pleasant woman answered. I told her I was the owner, and I had questions about my own listing, which was true, and she was happy to help, which undid her. She confirmed the cabin was listed. She confirmed the agent had photographed it. And then, chatting helpful, she mentioned that the same agent had also been out to my main residence to take pictures and pull an estimate of value because the family was thinking of moving everything at once. Everything at once. My home. The place I was standing in. The man in the suit on my lawn had not been idle curiosity. He had been an appraiser sent to price the roof over my head. Grant was not on a spree. Grant was on a plan. He meant to sell all of it, the cabin and the house, both, and turn my whole life into cash. And I was meant to be too broken or too far under to notice until it was done. I put the phone down and I thought coldly and clearly that I was out of my depth. Not out of my nerve. Out of my depth. This was law now, and I had spent my life beside the law without ever practicing it, watching from the little machine in the corner. So I did what a smart woman does when she reaches the edge of what she knows. I called someone who knew more. I called Harold Vance. Judge Vance had sat on the bench for 22 years, and I had taken down every word of a good many of his trials. He was retired now, gone gray and slow, but his mind was a trap that never rusted. When I told him who was calling, he was glad, and then he heard my voice and he got quiet and he said, "Carrie, tell me what happened." So I told him. All of it plain in order the way he had trained me to give it without knowing he was training me. I was silent for a moment when I finished. Then he said the words that changed the shape of everything. He said, "What your son did is not a family squabble. As your agent under that power of attorney, he owed you the highest duty the law recognizes, to act for you and never for himself. What you are describing is a breach of that duty, and moving an older woman's money for his own pleasure while she is in a hospital bed Carrie, that has another name in this state. That is the financial exploitation of an elderly adult. It is a wrong you can sue over. It can also be a crime. I sat with that. A crime. Not a disappointment. Not a hard truth about modern children. A crime with my son's name on it. Harold gave me one more thing. A name. Sylvia Ross, an attorney who did nothing but this, who spent her days pulling older people out from under the hands of the ones who were supposed to love them. Call her today, he said. Do not wait. And Carrie, he added before he hung up, his old voice rough. You always were the one person in my courtroom I could trust to get it exactly right. Get this one right, too. Sylvia Ross came to me. When I told her on the phone that I was 3 weeks out of open-heart surgery and could not drive, she did not make me come to her. She came to the house that same week with a briefcase and a soft handshake and eyes that missed nothing. Ruth Ann brought us coffee and then left us alone, and Sylvia spread my 11 pages across the oak table and read them without a word front to back twice. When she looked up, she said, "You built this." I told her it was my trade. She said, "In 20 years, I have never had a client hand me a cleaner case. Most people bring me a shoebox and a broken heart. You brought me a record." Then she told me what the record could do. She said, "First, the bleeding stops today. You still have your wits about you. Anyone can see that. And the law says a woman with her wits can take back the power she gave. So we revoke it. This hour. We put it in writing. We send it to the bank so they will never move another dollar on his say-so, and we record it with the county so he can never sign another paper about that cabin or this house. The moment they have that notice, his hands are empty. He just does not know it yet." She said, "Second, the money that is already gone does not come back with a signature, that we take back the harder way. Tennessee gives a woman your age the right to walk into court and sue the person who did this, to make him account for every dollar, to ask a judge to undo those transfers as if they never happened. And where it is bad enough and this is bad enough to make him pay you more than he took." She said, "Third, we report it. There are people whose whole job is to protect adults from exactly this, and we are going to put your son's name in front of them." I listened to all of it with my hands folded on the table, calm as a mill pond, and inside me something old and bent was slowly standing up straight for the first time in years. Then I showed her the last thing. I had almost not gone into the desk. It was the desk in the back room, the good one, and Grant had told me more than once, half joking, that it would be his when he took over my affairs. He had used it while I was gone. I could tell because things had been moved. And when I finally opened the wide-bottom drawer, there was a folder that was not mine. I had brought it out to the table without opening it all the way. Now I opened it all the way and I slid it across to Sylvia and I watched her face. Inside was a petition. A draft unsigned, the kind of thing a person prepares and sits on until the moment is right. A petition to the court. And the person it named as needing to be taken in hand, the person it described as no longer able to manage her own money, her own home, her own life, was me. Grant had been preparing to have himself made my conservator. I knew exactly what I was looking at. I had taken down conservatorship hearings for 30 years. I had watched more times than I could count. A person walk into a courtroom as a citizen and walk out as a ward, their money handed to someone else, their signature made worthless, their whole self reduced to a line on a docket. I had typed those words so often I could have recited the form in my sleep. And here was that same form with my name typed into it, waiting for a doctor to fill in the blank that said I could not be trusted with my own affairs. And then I understood the trip. The trip was never the point. The trip was the cover. While they toasted on that cliff, the paper was sitting in my desk, drafted and ready. My time in the hospital was not an inconvenience they had callously skipped. It was the evidence. A woman who had a stroke of the heart, who nearly died, who could not manage a house she was too weak to walk through. That was the story the petition was going to tell a judge. My worst week alive was going to be Exhibit A in the case that I could not be trusted to run my own life. Sylvia set the folder down very slowly. When she spoke, her voice had changed. She said, "Carrie, do you understand what this is? This is not just proof that he took your money. This is proof of why. He was not being reckless. He was clearing the ground. The money out the properties listed, and then this to put a legal wall around all of it, so that when you woke up and asked questions, the answer would be that you no longer had the standing to ask them. He meant to erase you on paper and keep the rest." I said, "I know. I typed the words 1,000 times. I never once thought I would find them pointed at me." She said, "Then let me tell you the good news. You found it first. It is still a draft. It never reached a judge. And it is not a wall around you now. It is a gift to us. It shows a court everything that was in his mind. When we walk in, we are not going to be arguing that he was careless. We are going to be showing them that he had a plan. We worked the rest of that afternoon at my table, the light going long and gold across the 11 pages and the folder and the certified statements stacked in their neat piles. And before Sylvia packed her briefcase, she laid 3 documents in front of me and she put a pen beside them and she told me what each one was. The first was the revocation. The moment I signed it, the power I had handed my son 4 years ago was gone, and once the bank and the county were told his hands would close on nothing. The second was the report. To the people who protect adults from what was being done to me. Signing it put an investigator on my son. The third gave Sylvia the right to file suit, to take him into a courtroom, the very kind of room where I had spent my life in the corner, and this time to say my name out loud as the one who had been wronged. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake now. It was the steadiest it had been since I woke to that ceiling. I signed the first. I signed the second. I signed the third. Somewhere out on a warm sea, my children were sleeping off another good dinner, sure of a mother who was broken and quiet and waiting where they had left her. They did not know the power was already gone from their hands. They did not know an investigator was coming. They did not know that the woman they had planned to erase had spent her whole life learning to make a record that no one could ever tear up. I set the pen down, and I looked at the 3 signed pages, and I said it quietly to Wallace, to the empty house, to myself. This is my record now, and soon, God help them, it is going to be theirs. I had a head start, and I knew to the day how long it would last. 3 weeks, that was the trip. I had found the itinerary in the same folder as the petition printed and clipped together, my son's careful hand laying it out, the way he laid out everything. 21 days airport to airport. 9 were already spent by the time I came home. That left me 12. 12 days to take my whole life back before they came up the driveway expecting to find it right where they had dropped it. I could not do it with my own 2 hands. My chest was still held together with wire, and the nurse still came each morning to press her cool fingers along the seam and remind me that a woman 4 weeks out of open-heart surgery does not lift, does not haul, does not climb a ladder. So I did not lift. I did what I had done in that courtroom for 31 years. I ran the whole room without ever getting out of my chair. I made the calls. I gave the orders. I let other hands carry what mine could not. The locksmith came first on a Tuesday morning, a young man with a van full of drills and a face that did not ask questions. Every door I told him, every window latch, every way in. He worked through the morning, and the sound of it filled the house like music, every screw a small bright note. When he handed me the new keys, they were heavier than I expected, and I closed my hand around them and felt something come back to me that had been gone a long time. This was my door now. It would open for me and for no one who had a copy of the old one. The bank was next. Sylvia's revocation had already gone to them in writing, and the moment they had it in hand, my son's name meant nothing there. He could not move a dollar. He could not so much as see the balance. I opened a new account he did not know existed in a bank he had never heard me name, and I moved what was left of my money into it, and I rerouted every check that came to me, my pension, the little that Wallace left, all of it into a place his hands could not reach. The bleeding had stopped. Now I began to build back the blood. Then there was the truck. Wallace's pickup sat in the carport under a gray tarp, the one he had restored the last 2 summers of his life, sanding and painting and cursing at it until it ran like new. Grant had laughed at that truck. More than once he had told me to junk it, that it was an embarrassment that no one drove a thing like that anymore. Well, I called a man who collected them, and he came out and looked it over and counted bills into my hand, and I watched the truck roll down the driveway one last time and felt Wallace beside me the whole way. The money went into the new account. The thing my son mocked was paying for my freedom. The cabin I took off the market with a single phone call. Grant's authority was gone, so his listing was gone with it, and the agent could do nothing but apologize. Then I made the hardest choice of all of it, harder than the locks, harder than the truck. I sold the cabin myself, on my terms, to a young couple with a little girl who cried when she saw the lake, the good kind of crying, and I signed it over to them, knowing Wallace would have handed them the keys himself. It broke my heart. I did it anyway, because for the first time it was mine to break and not his to steal, and there is a whole world of difference between those 2 things. The house I could not sell in 12 days, no one can, so I did what could be done. I put it up for sale, and I emptied it. Ruth Ann came every afternoon, and 2 young men she found from her church, and I sat in Wallace's chair and pointed, and they carried. I took the things that held love in them. His reading glasses, the quilt my mother stitched when I was a girl, the pocket watch into a velvet pouch, the photographs off the walls, and the things my children had already divided up in their minds out loud at my own table, I left exactly where they were. The good china page always said would be hers. The desk Grant swore he would use when he took over my affairs, the same desk where I had found the paper meant to bury me. Let them come home and find those things sitting there. Let them understand that nothing in this house had ever been theirs to count. And I found a place of my own. It was a small cottage, 2 counties over above a wide, slow stretch of the river where the water lay flat and silver in the mornings, and a heron stood in the shallows like it was waiting for me. Nothing grand. 1 bedroom, a porch, a view that asked nothing of me. I paid the first months myself from my own account with money no one had given me and no one could take. When I stood on that porch the first time and heard the water moving and nothing else, no phone, no footsteps, no sharp voice asking where the money was, I understood that I had not had quiet like that in 30 years. I was nearly done. The house was hollowed out. The bags were in the car. And then with 3 days left on their trip, the phone rang, and it was a number I knew, and it was the last person on earth I expected to help me. It was Brooke, my son's wife. Her voice was pitched high and fast and frightened, and she was whispering, and I could hear water and voices somewhere behind her, a hotel the end of a long holiday. She said, "Carrie, please, please, just listen. Something is wrong. Grant's cards are getting declined. He says it is a bank error, but I do not think it is a bank error. There was an email. From a lawyer. It had your name on it, and it used the word exploitation, and it used the word lawsuit, and Carrie, I am scared." I said nothing. I have learned there is no better question than a silence held long enough. And into that silence, Brooke poured everything. She said I did not know it was like this. I swear to you I did not. He told us you were stable. He told us you would want us to keep our plans, that you would be embarrassed to have us hovering. He told everyone to keep the trip quiet, not to post about it, not to mention it until things were settled. I thought that was strange, but I did not let myself think. And the money, the shopping, he handled all of it. He said it was fine. He said he had the authority. He said you had signed for it. Then she said the thing that turned her from an accomplice into a witness. She said, I have the messages. All of them. He knew, Carrie. He knew you were in surgery. He wrote it to me. He wrote she is under, they are operating now. And then 2 hours later, he wrote about moving the money in the same thread the same afternoon. I will send it all to you. Please, I need you to know I tried to help. I need you to remember that I am the one who called. I told her very quietly to send it. She did. It came through while she was still on the line, screen after screen of it, my son's own words with the time stamped beside each one, and it was exactly what she said it was. He knew I was on the table. He knew, and he reached into my account, and he told his family to keep their voices down while they spent it. I thanked Brooke. I did. I meant it in the strange, cold way you can mean a thing to a person who only helped you to save herself. Then I hung up, and I sent every screen straight to Sylvia, and Sylvia called me back within the hour and said one sentence. She said, Carrie, there is no case left to argue. There is only a case to finish. The investigator had already opened her file. Dana Whitfield, her name, was a plain and serious woman from the office that protects adults from exactly what had been done to me. She had come to the cottage to sit with me, taken her notes, looked at my 11 pages and the folder and the messages, and told me in a level voice that she had seen a great deal in her years and rarely seen it laid out so clean. Sylvia's demand for a full accounting was already in my son's inbox waiting for him under the sunburn. The suit was drafted and ready to file the moment the ink was dry on the last signature. Every piece was in place. All that was left was for them to come home and find out. I left one thing behind for them, only one. I did not leave a letter propped on the counter for anyone to read. I am a woman who understands evidence, and evidence is placed with care. So I took down the old family photo album, the fat one with the cracked spine, the one full of frosting-smeared birthday faces and sandy summers, and Wallace grinning at graduations. He was proud enough to burst over. I knew my children. When they walked into an empty house and their whole inheritance was gone, the first thing they would grab for the one thing they would tear off the shelf was the proof that any of it had ever been real. Inside the front cover, I taped an envelope. In it, I put a certified copy of the revocation, stamped and recorded so they could see in black and white that the power was gone. A copy of the demand for accounting, so they would know a lawyer was already at the door. The case number from Dana Whitfield's office, so they would understand this was not a family matter anymore, but a matter for the state. And a note in my own hand short, because I have learned that the shortest records are the ones that cannot be twisted. It said the locks are new, the accounts are closed, the power you took is revoked and recorded. There is a lawyer and there is a case number, and both of them have your name. Every dollar you spent while I was on that table you will answer for. I was awake for all of it. Do not call. Do not come. Nothing in this house was ever yours. I set the album back on the shelf square in the middle where it always sat, and I turned off the lights, and I locked my new locks behind me with my new key, and Ruth Ann drove me to the water while the sun went down behind us. They came home on a Sunday. I was not there to see it, but I have spent my life reconstructing rooms I was not standing in from the evidence people leave behind, and I can build this one down to the dust in the air. The taxi first heavy with luggage tan faces loud with the ends of stories. Grant stepping out with his sunglasses shoved up on his head, and that easy smile he wears when he is sure of things. Brooke behind him quiet, not meeting anyone's eye, already carrying what she knew. Paige pulling up in her own car with Colton and Maddie tumbling out sticky and tired, her voice bright and careless on the phone. They rolled their suitcases up the walk towards the house they were certain was waiting to receive them. Then the first stumble. Grant's key in the lock. A turn. Nothing. A harder turn, a jiggle of frown pulling down that easy face. He called back over his shoulder sharp, already asking Paige if she had changed the lock for some reason, and Paige said why on earth would I, and tried her own key, and got the same nothing. One after another they tried, growing louder, the children whining, and I imagined the first cold thread of wrong beginning to work its way up my son's spine. Then Paige at the window, her hands cupped against the glass. Then her voice high and strange. Then Grant shoving in beside her to see for himself. The room's bare, the walls empty of the photographs, the shelves stripped. His face, I like to think, going the color of ash under the sunburn, because some part of him, some quick and clever part, was already beginning to understand. And Ruth Ann dear, Ruth Ann waving cheerfully from across the street with flour on her apron, calling out that they had just missed their mother, that she had moved out a good week ago, sold the cabin too, seemed so light about it, so at peace. Their heads snapping toward her, Paige's mouth falling open, Grant crossing the lawn at her too fast, demanding where, demanding how, and Ruth Ann only blinking, surprised, saying, "Didn't she tell you?" and knowing full well that she had not. Then the phones. I know because I watched mine light up on the porch rail above the river, on and on Grant, and then Paige, and then Grant again, the screen glowing and buzzing and creeping across the wood. I did not pick it up. I sat with my tea, and I watched the heron in the shallows, and I let the silence say the thing I no longer needed to. And then at last one of them would think of the album. It is always the album. Grant would tear it off the shelf, looking for the one thing that could not be taken, and the envelope would fall out into his hands, and he would open it standing in the empty house, and he would read. I was not there. But I know my son. I know the exact moment the easy smile died, because it died when his eyes reached the word recorded, and then the word lawyer, and then the case number, and he understood that this was not a note from a hurt old woman that he could smooth over with a phone call and a lie. This was a record, cold and stamped and true, the kind I had spent my whole life making for other people, and had finally at 68 years old made for myself. The safety net was cut, and the paper he had drawn up to cage me was sitting in a lawyer's file now with his name on it, waiting to become the thing that caged him instead. I finished my tea. The heron lifted off the water and flew low across the river and was gone. And I thought for the first time in more years than I could count that I was not the one waiting by a door. They were. It took them 3 days to find me. I do not know exactly how. Maybe Ruth Ann let something slip out of kindness. Maybe Paige leaned on a cousin until an address fell out. It did not matter. I had known they would come the way you know a storm is coming by the color of the sky, and I was not afraid of it. Fear is what you feel when a thing might happen. This was going to happen, and I had already decided what I would do when it did. I was on the porch with my tea when the car door slammed. I heard the heavy footsteps come up the gravel 2 sets fast and angry, and then the pounding started on my new front door, hard enough to rattle the glass. Grant's voice muffled through the wood, calling my name like it was a thing he owned. I did not get up right away. I let them knock. I finished my tea, and I watched the mist lift off the river, and I let them stand out there and stew in it the way I had stood in a hospital hallway for days, waiting for a call that never came. There is a kind of power in making someone wait. I had learned it that week from the other side, and now I held it, and I was in no hurry to give it back. When I finally opened the door, Grant was flushed to the collar, his tie yanked loose like he had driven straight from the airport without stopping. Paige stood behind him with her arms wrapped around herself and her eyes swollen red. Brooke was not with them. Of course she was not. Brooke was 3 days into being the one who called. Grant did not wait to be asked. He pushed past me into my cottage, into my new clean rooms, his voice already climbing. "What is going on?" "The locks are changed. The house is empty. The cabin is sold. Where is everything, Mother? Where is all of it?" I closed the door behind him quietly, and I walked back to my chair, and I sat down because my heart was mended, but it was still my heart, and I had learned to be gentle with it. "Sit down if you like," I told him, "but you will not shout at me in my own home. Not anymore." "Our home," he said. "That house is our home." "No," I said, and I did not raise my voice because the truth does not need volume. "It was never yours. Not one brick of it. Your father and I built that life. I kept it standing alone for 27 years after he died while I typed depositions past midnight, so you could have shoes that fit and a college with your name on the diploma. You did not build it. You only ever came to take from it." Paige broke in, then her voice cracking. "Mom, how could you do this to us? We came home and everything was gone. We thought you would be there. We thought you would be waiting." I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "Waiting," I said. "Yes, that is the one thing I have always done. I waited on birthdays for calls that did not come. I waited in a hospital bed with a tube down my throat for a single one of you to walk through the door. I waited while the money I saved for a lifetime walked out of my account, hoping every day it was a mistake I would laugh about later. I am done waiting. I did all my waiting already. You were just never there to see it." And then Grant did what I knew he would do, because I know my son, and I have taken down 1,000 men just like him in that courtroom. He changed tactics. The anger folded up and something smoother came out from under it. He crouched down beside my chair and softened his voice, and he said, "Mother, listen to me. You have been through something terrible. Open heart surgery. That does things to a person. It muddles you. You are not thinking clearly, and I understand that, and I am not angry. But you cannot go making decisions like this on your own right now. Selling the cabin, emptying the house. This is not you. This is the confusion talking. Let me help you. Let me take care of it. Let me take care of you." There it was. The whole plan laid bare, said out loud to my face in a gentle voice. The confusion talking. She cannot be trusted to decide. Let me take care of it. It was the petition spoken instead of typed. He was running the same play right here in my living room, betting that I was still the soft old woman who moved over to make room. I let him finish. Then I reached over to the little table beside my chair, and I picked up my phone, and I pressed the number I had ready, and I put it on speaker and set it down between us. Sylvia Ross answered on the second ring. "Good afternoon," I said, still watching my son's face. "My son Grant is here with me. He was just explaining that I am too confused to manage my own affairs. I thought he should hear from you directly." Sylvia's voice came out of that little speaker, clear as a bell and cold as well water. "Mr. Lambert," she said, "I am your mother's attorney. I will keep this brief. As of 2 weeks ago, the durable power of attorney naming you was revoked in writing and recorded with the county. You have no authority over your mother, her home, her accounts, or her decisions. None. Any question about her competence can be settled by the fact that she revoked that power, retained counsel, and organized her own affairs down to the last document, which is more than most people manage on their best day. A demand for a full accounting of the funds you moved is sitting in your inbox. A civil action for the financial exploitation of an elderly adult has been filed in her name, and I would advise you as a courtesy that you no longer contact her directly. From here forward, you contact me." The room was very quiet. Somewhere out on the river, a fish jumped and fell back. Grant stood up slowly. The color had gone out of his face and left it gray. He looked at the phone, and then at me, and I watched him understand piece by piece that there was no soft old woman in this room to save him. That the ground he thought he was standing on had been gone for 2 weeks, and he had only just now looked down. "You cannot sue me," he said, and his voice had lost all its smoothness. "I am your son." "Yes," I said, "you are. That is the part I will carry to my grave. But being my son did not stop you from reaching into my account on the morning they cut my chest open. It did not bring you to my bedside. It did not keep you from drafting the paper I found in your desk, the one that would have handed you my whole life and left me a ward with no name of her own. I have taken down more conservatorship hearings than you have had birthdays, Grant. I knew what that paper was the second I saw it. You were not going to take care of me. You were going to erase me and keep the rest." Paige was crying openly now. "But the inheritance," she said through her hands. "The house, the money we thought we always thought." "That I said is exactly the problem. You thought of me as an inheritance, as a house and a bank account and a payout waiting on the far side of my funeral. You did not think of me as a mother. You did not think of me as a person who might get frightened in the night, or lonely at a table set for one, or scared to death on an operating table with no one holding her hand. So let me tell you what I have decided, since I am the one who gets to decide now." I leaned forward. My hands were steady. They had been steady since the day I signed those 3 pages. "The house will sell and the money is already where you cannot touch it," I said. "And my will is changed. I sat with Sylvia and I did it properly in my right mind, which a judge will confirm the moment either of you is foolish enough to ask. Not $1 goes to either of you. Every cent I have left in this world will go to a fund for young people who grew up the way you grew up, with a parent working past midnight to give them a chance. Except these young people will know what it cost. It will pay for their schooling. It will carry my name and your father's name. And it will do more good in 1 year than the 2 of you have done me in 20. Grant's jaw worked. His fists opened and closed. For a moment I thought he would try one more thing, one more voice, one more angle, the way a drowning man grabs at anything. He opened his mouth, and then he looked at me. Really looked, maybe for the first time in years. And whatever he saw in my face closed his mouth for him. "You should both go now," I said. "Sylvia has my number. You do not." Paige rose unsteady, her shoulders caved in. She looked back at me from the door with a face full of things she did not have the right to say. Grant did not look back at all. He walked out into the gray afternoon the way he had walked out of that hospital's reach 3 weeks before, sure of himself, right up until the door clicked shut, and this time the door was mine, and I was the one who closed it. I stood in the quiet after they were gone, and I waited to feel triumphant. I did not. That is not how it works, and anyone who tells you it does has never lost a child while the child was still alive. What I felt was tired and clean and unbearably light, like a person who has finally set down a weight she had carried so long she forgot it was not part of her body. Then I made a fresh pot of tea, and I carried it out to the porch, and I sat and watched the river until the light went. That was months ago now. The house sold in the fall to a family with 3 loud children, and I hope those walls hear more laughter than they heard from mine. The suit is grinding forward the slow, honest way these things do, and Sylvia tells me it will end where the evidence points, because evidence only points one direction when you build the record right. Dana Whitfield closed her part of it with a finding I do not need to repeat. Brooke writes to me sometimes short, careful notes, and I answer them short and careful back because she did a small, brave thing at the end, and I am not so hard that I cannot mark it. Harold Vance calls the first Sunday of every month the way old friends do once they have decided you are worth the trouble, and he ends every call the same way, telling me I got this one exactly right, and I have started to let myself believe him. The fund has a name now filed, and real my name, and Wallace's side by side on the paper. The first letter went out last week to a girl over in Blount County who wants to be a nurse and did not know how on earth she would pay for it. She knows now. Grant does not write. Paige called twice in the winter, and I let it ring not out of cruelty, but because I have learned at last that a ringing phone is not a debt I am required to pay. I will not lie to you and say it stopped hurting. It did not. A mother's heart is a strange and stubborn organ. Mine went on aching for children who did not deserve the ache, and some nights I still woke in the dark and wondered if I had been too hard, if I should have opened the door one more time. And then I remembered the tube in my throat, and the empty chair beside my bed, and the paper in the desk with my name typed into it, and I remembered that I did not leave them. They left me first, and they left me on the worst morning of my life with a glass raised in the sun. Here is what nobody tells you about growing old. They warn you about the aches and the failing eyes and the names that slip away. Nobody warns you how heavy it is when the people you poured yourself into decide you are worth less than a vacation. That weight is not in your bones. It is in your heart, and it will bend you double if you let it. But you can set it down. I set mine down beside this river, in a little cottage that is mine paid for with money, my own hands earned and my own name protected. My neighbors bring me pie and sit a while. There is a family down the bank with 2 small ones who have decided I belong to them, and in the evenings they come and we crouch at the water's edge and draw pictures in the wet sand with our fingers, and they laugh the way children laugh when nothing has taught them yet how to stop. And when I hear that sound, I hear the thing I was so sure I had lost for good. I hear that I still belong to somebody, and that belonging was never about blood or a shared last name. It was about who shows up. It always was. So maybe that is where my name will go in the end. Not to the ones who counted the days until my funeral, but to children who know a kind face when they see one. And if you are out there listening tonight, wherever you are, and you have felt that same cold sting of being looked through, of being treated like a wallet with a pulse, of giving your whole life to people who could not spare you a phone call when you were afraid, then I want you to hear an old woman say this plainly. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to lock the door. You are allowed to choose your own peace over their convenience, your own worth over their expectations, and you do not owe anybody an apology for it. I spent most of my life waiting for love to come back to me the same shape I gave it out. It never did. And that turned out to be all right, because the day I stopped waiting was the day my life became my own. So tonight, when I rinse this cup and turn off this lamp and listen to the river doing the only thing it has ever done, which is keep moving, I am going to say a quiet thank you. Not to them, to myself, for the locks and the ledger and the 3 signed pages, for learning at 68 to make the record for the one person I had never once put on the page. And maybe I will whisper it to you too, whoever you are. Do not wait as long as I did. Your peace is not out there somewhere waiting to be earned. It is a door, and the key has been in your hand the whole time. Go on, turn it.